Welcome back, everyone. It is Wins Above Fantasy episode 147. Today is Thursday, July 11th. For those of you joining on the podcast, for those of you joining on the live stream, welcome. We're doing this every Wednesday night. You guys can join us weekly throughout the rest of the season. I'm Van Burnett, joined as always by Mr. Steve Giswelli. We got a fun show, a Discord, Pitcherless Discord inspired show, talking biggest surprises of the first half. We got the good, the bad, and the ugly, Steve. We're going to be talking about a handful of different guys, different surprises for different reasons. And it's going to be a good one, man. I think some of the names that were thrown out by the people of the podcast and of Pitcherless Discord, some of these names felt like they were kind of mind reading for the surprises, I would have said. Other ones made me look twice because, you're so focused on managing your teams. You miss some of these guys. And then, of course, we looked at a lot of the names that were thrown out because we probably got 30 or 40 names. It was fantastic. And we said, okay, who is missing from this? So we got a few extra that we're going to throw in. But yeah, man, we're coming up on All-Star break. I know we were talking offline. I feel like industry leagues were kind of in the mix, but a little bit in purgatory. And I think we're both rocking our home leagues. This is the time of the year where you kind of got to dig in and still stick with it a little bit. But All-Star break is usually, this time of year is when you can catch your breath for just a minute. So always a fun time, Steve. Looking forward to this. Looking forward to the home stretch after All-Star break. And can't wait to get into it. How's it going, man?
It's good. Yeah, I'm at the All-Star break. I'm not usually at the point where I'm
fatigue.
Yeah, or just crawling to the finish line. It's like by the second day of the All-Star break, I'm itching my neck and wondering where the baseball is after having 3.5 months straight of baseball all day, every day. Freaking out when there's like a light scheduled day with, God forbid, like 2 games on it. It's always, it's like, I look forward to it. It's like, oh yeah, this will be a nice break, the All-Star break. And then by the time it's the second day, I'm ready for the full schedule to get back. But there is, I know some people don't like it, but there's a lot that goes on in All-Star break with the draft now pushed to that weekend. The home run derby's been a little bit more interesting with the new format, and there's even more tweaks this year. The futures game is cool. It's annoying that it's only 7 innings, and I think it's now like the Saturday night. I kind of wish it would be like, Sunday night futures, Monday night home run derby, Tuesday night game, and then we're back. So like we're only off that,
Right.
that
Forward.
Monday, Tuesday, really. Yeah. We have something going on those other days. Or I think the Wednesday and Thursday, most teams are off now too, which, oh God, I don't know how I'm going to make it. Just even thinking about it, but yeah, it's a good reflection point. I know we kind of did some first half shows, at the actual halfway point of the season. But it's only what, like it's truly like 10 days or so, 10 or 12 games, basically. From actually being the endpoint, what most teams will be at like 90-ish, 92 games, something like that at the All-Star break. So it's not that far off, and it's a nice delineated point. This is when we'll come up with second half splits now, right? Like this is it. Like it's kind of arbitrary when you think about it in season, but we do focus on it a lot, probably to a fault that we'd like to talk about with those arbitrary split numbers. But it's a great topic. Shout out to everyone in the PL Discord who gave feedback. We were throwing around show topics. I'm like, I'm just gonna throw this out into the Discord, and it started like a great like half hour's worth of conversation as people throwing out names. And it was a nice way to fill the rundown, which is cool.
They're making up for 90% of the names we're going to be talking about, but we should probably just list them out, Steve, in terms of the contributors, because we had Alex T, Alan Vaughn. I feel like, is this the same guy that's got like 3 E's?
Yes. Yeah.
VGoff with 3 E's. M Kava, LA Williams, Tyler, So these guys were the ones that, and props to you, Steve, for throwing it out there. That's a great focus group to give us a lot of these
Oh
names.
yeah.
Yeah, if you're listening, then be thinking of what your biggest surprises were, good or bad, pitchers or hitters, and see if they're the names that get ripped here. But yeah, Steve, any other thoughts on the topic? Pretty straightforward. I think the beauty is in kind of talking about these guys and looking under the hood at why that we're surprised. Are we buying it? What kind of went into it? So yeah, unless you got anything to add before we jump in, I think we got plenty to get to.
No, hit us up in the comments if you're watching on the stream. If we miss anything, or if there's anyone else you want to bring up, reach out to us on Twitter at WinsAbovePod on Twitter. You can shoot us an email too, winsabovefantasy@gmail.com. And most importantly, if you want to get in on the discussion, join the Pitcher List Discord, sign for PL Pro, get access to that. There's just constant baseball talk all year round. I would not be able to make my moves and transactions without second guessing myself and throwing the ideas and my trade ideas out in the Pitcher List Discord and getting feedback and just talking shop with everyone. I don't know how I did it before joining Pitcher List and getting access to that. So it's well worth it. So just wanted to plug that there. And hey, you could contribute to our rundowns on these podcasts as well.
Well, yeah, the first ones we wanted to get into, these came from Alex T, and great list here. Some that we're gonna zoom in throughout the show. I know we talked about like a CJ Abrams, Steve. That was a guy that you and I were kind of split on, and your liking of CJ Abrams is looking like the right call there. We got some pitchers we'll get to for sure. Brent Rooker is one that's very interesting in terms of the average, but the name that we wanted to start out with was Brenton Doyle. And this was a guy last year that we talked about on the podcast. You brought his name up a couple times, I think, Steve. Is that right?
I feel like I don't remember specifically, but I'll take credit if you're going to give that to me. So sure.
It is somewhere on the archives. If we could like run it through AI and have them
yeah,
like crank
maybe
out
we could ask
transcripts.
Chat GPT. Hey, which episode of WAF did we talk about Brenton Doyle? And
and
only let us know if it was good. Right?
Yeah, right. Crunch the transcripts and let us know where Steve said it. But I think it was like a ride the hot hand thing. And last year we saw Doyle in not that many games. Let's see. Let's just pull it up here. This is going to be a loose show, guys.
126 games.
Okay,
last
so
year.
decent amount, but just 10 homers, 22 steals was nice, but the 203 average.
It was the slash line. He had a 593 OPS last year. That was good for a 43 WRC plus.
And this year, the slash line, a 280 average, a 347 OBP, and a 465 slug, which is an 812 OPS. He has 13 home runs in 88 games and 20 steals. So pacing toward that kind of around like a 2040 season. Of course, not that simple, but Brenton Doyle, 26-year-old, obviously the Coors bump is always what's interesting. And what's also interesting is year over year, it looks like there's been some substantial improvements. So like the hard hit rate has climbed up like a huge 6 ticks on hard hit percentage. The barrel rate is up, which of course that pairs very nicely with Coors. Plate discipline, I think, is what you would question from last year, where you had a 35% strikeout rate. You look this year, 24.4% strikeout rate. So doing all the right things. Yeah, this was one, Steve, that like it's just hasn't been on my radar. I probably should because he's on my brother's home league team. But this one, I almost didn't have enough of an opinion to view this as a major surprise and chalked it up to just a Coors thing. But is Brenton Doyle here to stay? Just 26 years old. Is he the Rocky we were hoping for years that Garrett Hampson or Brendan Rodgers could be?
It's hard to say. Just I feel like, at least with this current iteration of the Rockies, and I don't mean to like crap on Nolan Jones, but there's it seems like there's a new Rockies hitter to roster every year, right? And you don't really know who it's going to be, and this year it happens to be Doyle. Like, and next year, who knows? Who maybe it'll be Sam Hilliard, who had 2 home runs tonight randomly, but I think there was a lot more writing on the wall, and a lot more that makes Brenton Doyle at least a little bit more believable. Sure, maybe it won't be a 20-40 season every year with an average that's you know that's helpful, let alone that you could just pass with, right? Um, and that being the pillars that he could lean on in the defense. He plays really good defense in center field. Um, it's 98th percentile fielding run value, and 8 outs above average. That's 96th percentile in the league. He has a really good arm too, like 100 percentile arm strength and arm value. I know those metrics from Savant aren't as reliable, or not necessarily reliable, but as sturdy as some of the other things that we can get into just with defensive metrics. But I don't want to go into that rabbit hole right now. But I still rely on them as a nice baseline, right?
Mhm.
So I think that sort of could have told you, hey, this is a Rockies hitter that, sure, like I'm going to just hold my nose and ignore the slash line. But he stole 22 bases in 126 games, plays really good defense, has non-zero power with the 10 home runs. Like this should have been, this was this was a more, obviously hindsight, but this was a good draft and hold play. And props to you if you did play it like that. I'm also just looking back at some articles and Jeff Zimmerman's Mind the News on Fangraphs. Like there was an article in May about how Brent Doyle's swing has become more efficient, to identify some mechanical adjustments that he made towards the end of last year, but the returns in spring were good. He changed the position of his hands, so that it was more direct to the ball. Um, gave his eyes a little more time to react to pitches. So it's hard to not take those things with a grain of salt. And some of I'm sure in all those mining news articles for as many Brenton Doyle, this positive swing adjustment, and it yielded a breakout. I'm sure for every one of those, there's a positive swing adjustment that there's a guy that we don't even know and we're just ignoring because it hasn't clicked, right? But I think this was a smart play because the raw tools were there. There was talks of mechanical adjustment like that, but that's like gravy if that happened, and that's sort of what is happening. Like Brent Doyle is useful in draft and hold if he is even a 215 hitter with the 13 homers and 20 steals. Just because he plays in Colorado, but the fact that he's cut his K rate by 10%, increased his walk rate, his barrel rate is up 3%. 2%, excuse me, hard hit rate up 6%. He's chasing less. He's swinging in the zone more, making more contact, swinging and missing less. Like check. Like
Mhm.
I think Brenton Doyle may it's going to be hard for him not to have the Nolan Jones hype for next year. It seems.
Yeah. I mean, you breaking that down was just making me think for how often we were talking about like it would be great if we could see some of the swing speed metrics year over year, and we just can't.
Yeah.
Because if he did make some of those changes, but like I'm just curious where he falls. So pretty middle of the pack on like that acceleration metric that we talked about with Kyle Bland, and we've talked about a few times. But yeah, I mean, I agree, Steve. It's like to me when you see plate discipline improving, the batted ball contact improving, a guy who's 26 years old. You brought up kind of the defensive metrics that are more for real baseball and stability for
Yeah.
playing time and volume
It
and everything.
matters for our game. It matters for our game.
Yeah, it does. And he's hit everywhere from first, second, fourth, fifth. So in a way, that depleted Rockies offense is kind of helping from a volume standpoint as well. I know it's been a while since we've talked about that, but some of those studies that like sometimes your counting stats are better hitting third or fourth for a bad team than hitting like seventh or eighth for a good team.
And
So
I forget who tweeted it out, but an underrated thing about being playing games in Colorado is like hitters average, I think, like a plate appearance more per game just because of the BABIP being so high. There being so many more hits and runs in Colorado. So Colorado players just naturally get more at bats, right? Which is
Mhm.
an underrated aspect. And one caveat I'll say, and it's not for all these guys, and it's not to like single out Doyle, but just something that I've been thinking about and been trying to apply as like a lesson learned. Like a lot of these guys that we talk about, especially on this show, is like a weekly episodic show. Like we talk about a lot of these guys like at their peak. Like I remember being super hyped about Joe Adell when he was on fire in May. And
Yeah.
not saying that Brent Doyle is going to be Joe Adell, but like a lot, like we're talking about Brent Doyle when he is scorching earth hot right now.
Uh-huh.
So we're giving those sort of back of the napkin, doubling the projection, doubling the stats for the rest of the season line, like at a high point. So just keep that in mind. Like, I've rostered Doyle this year, and like as soon as he's left course, like I've dropped him, and he stayed on the wire until we had another home series, right? So that's also just something you can consider. But I'm not saying that Brent Doyle, like he should be rostered in basically all formats. I think for the rest of the year, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was just trying to pull up. Yeah, I can get to it, but like some of the rolling charts. To your point, Steve, is like, yeah. Here we go. Okay, so I've got it here. I just want to go to like hitter performance for Doyle and see. I'm sure it's on splits too, but on Kyle Bland's rolling charts again, another pitcherless plug, guys. That if you're a PL Pro member, you get access to these awesome rolling charts. But yeah, it looks like he did. So he started solid and then kind of plummeted throughout June. So yeah, that's a good point, Steve, that like we are kind of, at least right now, seeing him on uh basically a peak, right? So it's just, yeah, food for thought on the sample size. But yeah, overall for Doyle, I mean, you're talking about a guy who had an ADP of 480 in the offseason. So yeah, either way, it's a very pleasant surprise. To shift over to another one that was thrown out that was a great name from Alex T in the Discord. On the other side of the ball, it's Seth Lugo. While talking ADPs, Seth Lugo was an ADP of 267. So just looking for a back end of the rotation. And all of a sudden you find yourself with a guy who's going to be going to his first All-Star game, 221 ERA, a little less than a strikeout per inning, but a 104 whip. He's been part of that pleasant surprise Royals push that was also called out as kind of a collective team surprise. So yeah, when it comes to Lugo, like the first thing that jumps out is the dude's just got like such a full arsenal. Like it's more
it's
pitch
funny looking at
types.
a savant
It is, man.
page.
You
You
think
never see, you don't see anything. There's 8 pitches. It's
I'll tell
crazy.
you who comes to mind for me. You, Darvish, and Aaron
Yeah.
Savale when it comes
Yeah.
to like, oh, these guys have like 8 pitches. Where do you even start with year-over-year changes? But I guess when you kind of decipher it, the curveball is one that has taken a big step forward this year. 38% whiff rate. Again, that's the Savant number. So that's help me out, Steve. It's for all swings. 38% of the swings were whiffs.
Correct.
And last year that was 27%. So pretty big jump there for the curveball. The velocity actually came down a little bit on the four seamer. But yeah, the guy's been a command artist for a few years, and it's not like the strikeouts have really taken a step forward. So it seems like it's kind of a pitch sequencing thing or location. But talk to me about Lugo, Steve. Obviously, it's a pleasant surprise. We don't need to spend the whole show talking about Lugo. I know we talked about him probably 4 or 5 episodes back. But man, what a pleasant surprise if he's become an SP3 for many teams. And yeah, he was drafted as waiver wire fodder.
I don't mean to sound like hot takey here, but I would be looking to trade Seth Lugo if I had him.
Selling high.
I think that what Seth Lugo is going to be rest of season is what he was last year, which is 146 innings of a 3.56 ERA with a 23% strikeout rate. That's really, really good. But all of the underlying metrics, like the K rate is a half a tick off. The walk rate's exactly the same. The swing strike is slightly up. It's not even a percentage point up. The CSW is 1 point up. The barrel rate's a little down, but we know that's noisy for pitchers. The ERA indicators are all mid threes to high threes. Last year, they're all high threes to mid fours, right? I think he's a guy that's always going to beat those by a little bit, but I don't think he's going to beat them by a run and a half like he is now with this 2.22 ERA. So I like Seth Lugo. There's a lot to like because of that arsenal. Maybe it'll be a guy that I'm always underrated because he does have that high arsenal. And Saras has talked about it a bunch on Rates and Barrels, how essentially having multiple fastballs is a cheat code. And the amount of pitchers that are using multiple fastballs in the league is increasing exponentially. And essentially, you're going to need to have multiple fastballs to be able to attack both sides of the plate effectively, both handedness effectively. And Lugo's like on the forefront of that. So maybe the regression won't be as bad as I think it seems, but I don't think that he's going to have a 2.22 ERA in the second half. I think it'll be more of like a 3.5, and the end of season line will look great. But I think you can cash in on it. I know it's a great home park, but I just expect a little bit of regression and him to come back more in line with those underlying numbers of a decent enough K rate, good walk rate, and a mid threes ERA.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not a hot take that he'll regress from the low twos, but the sell high, it's interesting.
Especially with everyone wanting pitching now.
Yeah.
But I think I would do it.
I mean, without looking, Steve, because I got it right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Can you throw a dart on where you feel he falls in Nick Pollock's list on the top 100?
Where Nick's ranks him, or where
Nick
I would put him?
Lugo. No, where Nick has him.
Nick has Seth Lugo, and I don't have this up, at 28.
Good guess, 22.
A little bit higher. So
that is better than I thought, or like more favorable than I thought.
Well, yeah, I would have thought. And like, I'm sure there's plenty of pushback as to why he's not higher, right? But I think
right.
I would like to think that Nick would agree with some of the points that
for sure. Yeah, I'm just I mean, again, the whole
like by results wise, like right by judging by ERA,
5.
It's like why isn't he a top 5 pitcher, top 10
for
pitcher?
Sure. And I think the Ks are a thing, but like who had him above Freddie Peralta on their bingo card by All-Star break? So
but I would rather have Freddie Peralta for the rest of the season then.
Yes, I agree with that. So we'll keep it rolling. That's Seth Lugo. Let's go back to a hitter, Steve. And I guess I should let you lead this one in because while he's both of our boy, you were the OG on this one. And man, I feel like we don't have enough shares for what is a little bit of a power break out here.
Yeah, I feel like I jumped off of I don't know if I can claim Stephen Kwan anymore. Shout out to Alex Chamberlain, who on the peripheral prospects series. That's where I came on to him and had a bunch of shares before his breakout 2 years ago. But was kind of fully out last year. Didn't really have any shares and was a pretty honestly disappointing season, right? It was that you bought for batting average, and he had.
I'll tell you why, Steve. It's because I burned a keeper slot on him in my home league at a lofty price.
Yeah, you talked about him being a cheap code. Yeah, right. And but he didn't really.
No.
Yeah, sure. Maybe
he saved it for this year.
But yeah. This is insane. What's going on? Like this is the peak average. Like 363, like he's a hot month away from floating with 400. But what's crazy is the 9 homers.
Yes.
It's also a little bit crazy, and I'm just looking at this now because I don't have Stephen Kwan anywhere, but he only has 4 steals and 8 attempts. So that's a little surprising because at least you got the 21 last year with just 3 caught stealing, right? Right. I am shocked that steal number is that low, but
it's flipped. It kind of feels like the Bichette thing where like you had him pegged as like a speed guy, and then you're like, wait, 20 homers and 5 steals, like that's Bichette's game.
Yeah,
but yeah, for Kwan, I mean, also what's surprising to me is I would have expected to see with the 9 homers in the first half, a barrel rate above 2.1%.
Yeah, I mean, that is double of what he was last year. Believe it or not, he was 1.1% last year, but
Some good
it
pull
is a pull fly ball thing, right? Like
in the ballpark. Yeah.
yeah, the new ballpark, and that was a great surprise brought up from the
That's right.
Pitcher List Discord.
Yeah,
Because
they were saying like the
yeah, I
Guardians,
think
I
that was
think
Tyler,
Tyler.
just like
Yeah.
the whole offense and how the ballpark has affected that, and it's definitely um, a part of it. And he does have all of his homers basically down the line or to the far pull side. There's one that's like right center, or I would say one that's like center-ish, one that's right center. The rest of them are all pulled down down the right side. So he is hitting more fly balls this year. That's super interesting considering that his batting average has gone up, and he is pulling the ball more. So it looks like he's kind of finding that sweet spot of being this unreal contact hitter that doesn't strike out. Um, while also getting the most out of his pull fly balls and pulling fly balls more often. So,
Double the numbers. I know you hate it, Steve. We
yeah,
all do for good reason. Let's say he comes down from 361 to 340, wins the batting title, 18 homers, 8 steals, 340, 110 runs. And where's he at on RBIs? Oh yeah, that's where it drops off. 54 would be doubling 54 RBIs. What's that line do for him in draft rooms next year?
yeah, it's too high, but I don't think he's going to get 18 homers. I would be surprised if he got 15.
You think he
I
would
would
be a
take I would
third
take the
rounder, fourth?
I don't know. There's a like what was Luis Arias's peak draft point, right? I guess
I can pull that up.
he
Oh
never
yeah,
had this many home runs, right?
throughout March, it was 153 this past
Yeah.
season.
Yeah, was that the highest he ever went? Yeah, I would think so. He did hit
Yeah.
10 homers last year, but I mean, I guess if Quan does get to 15, that's a bit different. I would think that he would probably be around pick 100, which is kind of where he was in 2023, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he had the 6 homers, 19 steals, and hit 300. He was around the pick 100 player, if I
Yeah,
remember
you're
that
right.
correctly.
The steals and the homers will probably flip flop, right? So we'll end up
Yeah,
around
or
13,
I would think
13.
so. I would
Yeah.
think so. I would think so.
It's interesting, man. I mean, the runs again, if he can get around 100, because that's where Arias this past year only had 70 runs in 2023. So I think that could sneak him up there. I could see Quan being in between 50 and 80 overall next year because yeah, it seems like he's figuring something out with the fly ball rate. Like
Yeah,
that's an approach thing. He's a
if he
great
does
hitter.
hit, yeah, if he does surprise me again and hit another 9 homers in the second half, then yeah, I could see him creeping to be like a top 75 player.
Okay.
I think there rightfully is though a bias against like these batting average reliant players. Like so much needs to go right for them to hit 300, right? Because like
More
look at
than two
last year, Quan is the
categories.
example.
Yeah,
Like right,
you're right.
you need 1 year of a 294 BABIP instead of a 374 BABIP or a 323 BABIP like he had in 2022, for it to be basically a disaster of the season because the 5 homers are going to kill you. Sure, the 21 steals last year sort of saved you with Quan, but now with just the 4 in this half, it's kind of not something that I don't think you could bank on.
Yeah, you got to
As
get
safely as you
to
thought last year.
3 categories, and if it's just runs and average, then you at least need half and half on steals and homers, for example. So yeah, I mean, it will definitely be interesting to watch because I think he's still figuring out.
Who would you rather have for 2025, Brenton Doyle or Stephen Kwan? I like when
Juan.
you. I like. All right, I'm going Doyle. Let's put it on the board.
There we go. That's another one. All right. We've got more names and flipping back over to pitchers that we'll be talking through, but we got to take our first ad break. We'll be right back after this. So, Steve, jumping over to some surprise pitchers. This is where we open it up a little bit in terms of the input from the Discord. I know we were spending a lot of time there with what Alex was throwing out, but in terms of the pitchers, we got a handful of guys. So let's start it out here and talk about Jack Flaherty. And Flaherty was from Alex, but we've also got let's see, Luis Heel that Begoff threw out. He also had Flaherty in there, and then Garrett
few others
Crochet.
throughout Lugo too that we already touched on. Yeah, Crochet,
Yep.
Amanaga, Hauk.
Hauk is a great one. The Red Sox rotation's been excellent. That was another call
The
out.
biggest one for me though is one that Alex mentioned is Jake Irvin. I just had no shares. Did not expect any of this at all from Jake Irvin. Didn't see it coming. That's the biggest surprise, at least to me, so far. Of these names, like, not to pat myself on the back or but Flaherty was impressive in spring. Like,
Luis Heel,
we saw that coming.
We had
Heel
shares.
too. Yeah, we had I had pre. So yes, there's still surprises in the fact that I didn't think that they would be this good, but they weren't out of nowhere like Jake Irvin has been. I just did not see that. Like, Jake Irvin was a guy that, like, you were excited when he pitched, in the fact that you could stream against him, last year. Now he's got a 3.13 ERA, and is striking out 22% of the guys and walking only 6%. Like, it looks like Seth Lugo with like a little bit of a higher ERA, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I know I've talked about it a lot this season, but I think not that this is a hot take. This is like saying I like high velocity pitchers. Like, who doesn't? But it seems like the more I'm stumbling across guys that are like head scratchingly good, the common denominator for a lot of these guys is that they have incredible extension, and that is like so top tier extension for Jake Irvin.
Yeah.
And his four seamer velocity is 94, which doesn't jump off the page. But when you add 7 feet of extension, like, that's like kind of in that Bailey Ober space. That's one of the reasons why
he didn't have that last year though.
Oh,
so maybe that he did have good extension. It was 81st percentile at 6.8 feet. This year it jumped to 7 feet at 92. Maybe that's something that we should be looking at earlier in the season, like, as we look for a velocity gainers. We'll be looking for IVB increasers next year. Maybe extension's something that we could look at early on, as something that could improve. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not. Is that something that pops up on? Yeah, it is on leaderboard. So I'm just curious.
Yes, the Savant has it as a slider.
Yeah, that could be an interesting little
Yeah.
show topic coming up. Is like, I mean, there's guys on there like Sean Manaea is probably
and
like
he's been good, and he's been good. Yeah,
right. And it's just like, so who are some of the guys that, like, Gavin Williams, and he's been good. So yeah, that is a good one. But you're right, Steve. Jake Irvin, for all the reasons you pointed out, but especially that none of us had it on our radar.
Yeah.
And the swing
as
and miss
far
stuff,
as surprises, he is the biggest actual surprise for me in the true definition of the word.
Totally. 104 whip, 3.13 ERA, like you said. So yeah, I think that's a good one. Who else do we want to hit on in this space? I mean, we've talked about Flaherty to some extent. Luis Heel, we talked about, obviously. He had the 3 almost like droppable for a second. Then he had the great comeback start the other night. Imanaga, I think, has been kind of up and down a little bit, but overall, you're super happy with the first half he's put in. I think let's punch in on Tanner Houck a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about him this year yet. So yeah, let's do that.
So let's just first start with the line here. 111 innings pitched, 106 strikeouts, a 268 ERA, and a 105 WHIP. Houck was very much on the radar a couple years back. I almost want to say that's when we had Dave Mendelson, when we had Mendy on the pod, and he was real big on Tanner Houck. And I know that, yeah, we were interested, but then he kind of built us up to let us down a little bit because in 2023 last year had a 501 ERA and a 137 WHIP. So I think we're left to look now at kind of what has changed from last year to this year that kind of unlocked all this. And some of the stuff that we always liked about him, because he was kind of in that gosh, help me out with the guy, high ground ball rate and high swing and miss rate. The guy we loved from Milwaukee that never turned a corner. Aaron Ashby, right?
Aaron Ashby, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like
That
these
could
two
be
were
one.
both like the high ground ball. So his ground ball rate is great, but it still was last year. It looks like okay, so it's really been a control thing. So here's where his walk rate the last 2 years, 8.9% walk rate in 2022 and 2023, a 5.1% walk rate this year. So nearly like cuts it in half. And is this another one that takes a little bit of velocity off? I mean, to some extent, but yeah, that slider first approach is kind of wild. Yeah, I'm just curious, Steve. I don't have any shares of Houck, so this is one that I think you could say is a surprising one for me. I mean, I knew that both Houck and like Cutter Crawford have plenty of talent, but now Houck is 28 years old and he has yet to turn the corner until this season. So this one is a surprise for me. It's interesting to see.
I wrote about Houck, I think, after the 2021 season, where he had, a really strong second half with that 30.5% strikeout rate. It was only 13 games started, but he walked only 7.4% of the guys he faced. And like, the word on Twitter and the street was that he was like Chris Sale from the right side just because of his delivery and lanky arms and things like that. And he still kind of looks like that. And he did have trouble against lefties, but I believe he's figured that out to some extent, as well as limiting the walk rate this year, and that's sort of led to the breakout. He's thrown a sinker more, and as well as the splitter, which the splitter was, I remember specifically writing about this in 2021, was that it was a good pitch, but he didn't use it that often, and that would be the key to unlocking, his issues versus lefties. And what do you know? When he has a breakout year this year, he's throwing the splitter now 25% of the time. He throws it to lefties, as his second most used pitch to lefties behind the slider. So he has two reliable options in the slider, splitter. He also still throws the sinker, just not as often to lefties. So yeah, it's sort of a case for me, never wrong, just early sort of thing.
Right.
I was just maybe a few years early on Tanner Houck, and I wish that I still believed in it, but it was hard to last year after a rough 60 innings, with just a 22% strikeout rate and a 9% walk rate. It's hard to see that that was in 2022, but even last year was a worse K rate with the same walk rate and 106 innings. So uh yeah, it's weird too because it's the worst swing strike rate of his career,
Right.
but
On every pitch.
on every pitch too. Yeah, overall. But I mean, it's the best called strike plus whiffs percentage though, so that means he's getting more called strikes, right? So it just shows that it takes some time. Like last year, he started to throw the split finger a little bit more, and was probably developing a feel for it. And then this year, he worked on it, and it finally happened for him. I'm curious. I'm going to pull up some of the articles from early in the offseason to see if there was like, hey,
Well,
Hauk's more comfortable with the splitter that led us, that could have been a sign for us to believe in that. That's something that I should have focused on, considering that I called it out as something that needed to happen for him. But I'll see what that says.
You get a free pass, Steve, on an article from 3 years back. But there's a lot of guys.
Yeah, Hauk wasn't even. It's just names that were listed as potential starters, right? Like Hauk wasn't. This was before they traded Sale, but he wasn't even guaranteed a spot in the rotation. That's what. So I think two people brought that up too, and that's a good transition to it. Like the Red Sox rotation as a whole has been a really big surprise. I think Eno put it on as one of his bold predictions that the Red Sox would have like a top 3 rotation in the bigs, and they've been really, really good. I mean, Pivetta, Crawford, Hauk.
Hauk is 19th on Nick's list. Crawford is 32nd on the list, and then I think honestly Bayo was a little disappointing.
He might have been the guy that I like the most. Yeah.
Right. And we like Pivetta. I certainly like Pivetta, and he's been better, but he's 49th on the list, but he had a good start again today with, I think, 10 strikeouts again. One really interesting thing about Hauk, 2 interesting things. One, the slider last year, 11 inches of horizontal break. This year, 17 inches of horizontal break. So big jump there. And then the other thing that's of note is on his pitcher list page, he is number 1 in the entire league on PLA, which is the PLV ERA scale, where it basically takes, pitch by pitch. Was that a good pitch based on the circumstance and all of that? And so kind of removing some luck and focusing on what he should have thrown when, all of that stuff. He is a PLV darling, which is probably, another reason why Nick's got him in the top 20 of his list, even though he's just got a 23% K rate. But Hauk, 28 years old. Hats off. It's a surprise and one that we'll have to kind of reconcile with all offseason on draft prep and everything like that.
Yeah, sure.
Well, moving from Hauk, is there any other pitchers that you want to punch in on, Steve? I mean, Flaherty, Heel, Imanago.
We've talked about a lot of these guys. I don't know. Maybe I'm less surprised by the other 3 just because I have a lot of shares of them everywhere. I like those guys a lot. So
I think Ronaldo Lopez I would throw in.
That's a good one. That's a good one that we should have definitely brought up, or at least put in the section that we'll get to at the end. But Ronaldo Lopez, Garrett Crochet too for me. I know that's kind of like probably for a lot of other people how I feel about Flaherty, Heel, and Imanaga. I think I had 1 or 2 shares of Garrett Crochet. I think I picked him up early in like one of the industry leagues. And I drafted him in like a draft that I had late. So like I was kind of just like, oh, people are drafting Garrett Crochet. Like, let me jump on. Like, but I did not expect, like, I kind of, and maybe I need to, this could be a lesson learned. Like and it's probably because it was the White Sox, like if it was any other team, and maybe I would have been interested, but I was like, how are the White Sox going to start Garrett Crochet? Like he's thrown like 11 innings total over the last 4 years. Like, what are they even thinking? Like, how is that a good idea? It's like, he should be a closer. And I was just dismissive of it. So for him to be this amazing, and he didn't experience like the Luis Hill or the Imanaga, sort of adjustment back to the league. It's like, the league's figuring me out. Like Crochet hasn't had that. Sure, maybe it's going to come in the form of some sort of innings limitation down the stretch, but he could also get traded and some team could want to use him for the rest of the year. If I was a team that wanted Crochet, I would trade for him like now. So I could give him like that rest over the All-Star break, maybe do like the Phantom IL stint or something like that. But I would want to be able to control how to use his innings sooner. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Garrett Crochet was like the first player traded, if he is traded this deadline.
I've been waiting the whole time. I mean, I think Eric Fetty is another great one where it's like a 2.99 ERA.
Maybe not the innings concern. There's
you're right. Not the concerns, but also just like what are the White Sox waiting for? the stock is high, so why not dump? But
Yeah.
no, that's great. Just to tie a bow on the Hauk discussion, because we're bringing it up with some other guys. His ADP, Steve, was 400 in the month of March, where Cutter
Man.
Crawford was 229. So it's a little revisionist history. Brian Bayo 215. Pavetta was before that. So of the Sox, like you said, and it almost feels like Christian Javier years back, where it's like maybe we need to be throwing a little bit more darts on some of those really good stuff, but not a secure rotation spot.
Yeah.
Luis Heel was another one in that camp, and that's panned out. It seems like that bet on stuff mentality is usually has a handful of,
I could see why, Bayo was guaranteed the rotation, has a bunch of stuff, struck out a lot of guys. It's like
that's true.
in draft season, like why take the risk of not knowing which one is going to be in the rotation when I could just take the guy with arguably better stuff than the other two that are in the rotation. But maybe in draft and hold, it's a good strategy to get all three, right? Like almost do a team stack there. If you believe
that's a good
in
point. That's a good point. There's some great pitchers in that zone, man. Taj Bradley,
don't draft pitchers
Tanner
early.
Houck. Oh my gosh.
Early.
Shane Baz, Ronaldo Lopez. Wow. Okay. Well, we got more names coming up, guys, and talking about some surprise hitters in bulk like we just did for pitchers. But we're going to take our second ad break, and we'll be right back after this. So, Steve, shifting over to hitters, excuse me. I think we can go in a lot of different directions, but no surprise where I'm going to take it. And it's one that Alan Vaughn brought up. And honestly, as a Cardinals fan, I can say I am very surprised at the season we've had from Alec Burleson. Steve, you've brought it up to me. We've talked about it with like Victor Scott, and we were saying, okay, well, what's the Cardinals outfield situation? Burleson wasn't even the odd man out. He was like the third odd man out in terms of thought he was just a utility guy, like a Descalso type of like, he's going to pinch hit. He's going to get some moments, but he kind of just took those small opportunities at the start of the season and literally forced the Cardinals' hand. It's like, talk about the bingo card. There's a lot of Cardinals you could have said that about and not been surprised. But I think Burleson, even though he's just 25, and even though there's been moments where people have liked what they've seen from him with just kind of that Cardinal way, plate discipline, things like that. But 15 homers, a 283 average, and despite kind of being a bigger guy, it's 7 steals already. So Burleson is he's just cruising. He's been one Cardinal who's had a good RBI total as well. So looking at kind of year over year, it doesn't look like anything's like totally jumping off as like in terms of batted ball stuff, but everything has gone up in the right direction. And for a guy who gets the most out of pull power, it looks like that's what he's doing, despite being in one of the worst homer parks in the big. So your thoughts on Alec Burleson? I'm pleasantly surprised even from being this close to it.
As much as we and I rag on, the Cardinals for having outfielders that have breakouts once they leave, and for begging them to get rid of the guys that I like in the outfield so that get breakouts anywhere, I think it's only right that I give them credit for as one that's worked in their favor and one that is breaking out seemingly before our eyes there too. So, props to them for that. It is definitely a surprise for me. I did not expect Alec Burleson to be, 22% better than league average with 14 homers and 7 steals heading into the All-Star break. There was a lot to like too last year. The K rate was good. There was some raw power, right? Like, I'm trying to pull up the scouting grades on that. Not fully used to the new Fangraphs player pages yet. Okay, there we go. You got to go to the prospect report. It was 45 game power, 55 raw power for future. So like, yeah, there was a bit to like there. I think there was a stretch last year where he got pretty hot and hit a few homers. And whenever there's a guy that has a low K rate and power potential, you're always interested. The barrel rate still isn't great. The hard hit rate's okay. But what is interesting is a theme here. I'm sort of pulling up the mining the news and what was written about these guys in the preseason to sort of see if we could see anything coming with this.
Yeah.
But there was a note from um, a February 1st edition of Mining in the News from from Jeff Zimmerman over at Fangraphs is that Alec Burleson reworked his diet and workout this offseason. He did things differently by seeing a nutritionist to work on his diet and to move better. When he played college baseball at East Carolina, the 12-pound was in the outfield the last 2 seasons to get more work and get in the lineup more often. But he basically said what he worked on was the body, getting everything moving better, losing weight, getting faster, checking all those boxes, ticking off a lot of things that I want to accomplish this offseason, and it's coming together. So sort of something that we roll our eyes at in best shape of his life season. That was prime best shape of his life season. That's right when camp opens. But hey, I mean, sometimes these things, work out. And now he's ready. He's playing the, better than me. He's playing the outfield, right? Like he's actually in the outfield, not just DH and first base or anything like that. And a guy like that sees Goldschmidt and Wilson Contreras is going to be at DH when he isn't catching, so he needed to get in the outfield, and props to him for being for working on that and becoming a player that's able to play there and is doing well. I'm definitely surprised by it. Another guy that I had and dropped, wish I held on to a little bit longer, but that's the hard thing too with these surprises, right? You don't know how long it's going to last for some of these guys. We are surprised because it is lasting so long.
Yeah, he's got 50 games in the outfield, 7 at first, and then about 20 DHing. So mixing it up. One thing interesting looking at his PLV rolling charts is despite everything you talked about, Steve, like the plate discipline is good, the decision value this year is his ugliest chart, where it's just been constantly going down. However, the contact is very high, well above MLB average, and then the power story has looked consistently above MLB average. So it kind of makes you wonder too. I'm going to switch over to swing aggression. That's why you guys got to be on here. Oh yeah. So the swing aggression
is more
is
aggressive,
miles above MLB average. Now let's jump it back to 2023. And it looks like, nope, that would be Juan Soto. I love how that just jumps.
Yeah, like it always reverts back.
Yeah.
So he's swinging in the zone a bunch more. He's and only chasing a little bit more. So he's swinging at more pitches in the zone, still making 80%, 81% contact, down a little bit more swing and miss, but he's basically swinging at pitches in the zone more, at least just from looking at the raw swing numbers.
His swing aggression last year, his swing aggression last year skyrocketed at the end of the season.
Yeah,
so I wonder if that was like an approach thing overall, because it looks
he
like
only swung at 51% of his 52% of his pitches last year. He's up to 56.5%. So he is swinging more. The call strike percentage has gone down from 14% to 11% to 12% this year. So, getting less called strikes on him, which is a good thing. Right. So it's just interesting, especially when the K rate doesn't suffer with those changes, right? He's still striking out just 13% of the time. So that's 14, but still really, really good. I mean, he's not walking that much. That's where he's sort of suffering in that, but I mean, I'll take the 283, 319, 467, 464 slash line with 14 homers, right? Like, sure, it's not like the 800 OPS that you would want from a power hitter, but that's just because he's walking a little bit less. But in 5 category leagues, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and swinging more at first pitches. So that's a little bit on Burleson. I don't know that we're buying the double of these stats,
No,
right, Steve?
no,
You think
no.
maybe
Yeah.
25
homers,
25
yeah.
homers, average
280.
probably
It's
comes down
still
a
a good
little bit.
player. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny to see that tweet out there. I don't know if you saw it. That was saying, not saying we should, but we might be able to deal an Alec Burleson for an SP2.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, you don't have to convince me on bats for
Get rid of
arm
Jordan Walker and Newpar so they could have breakout somewhere else.
stock. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so Steve, the floor is yours on who you want to talk about next.
I don't know. We were talking in show notes and just doing some prep that we haven't really talked about CJ Abrams and any chance I can get to pat myself on the back, I'll do it because we know that I have plenty of misses too that we could talk about. So.
Well, I definitely predicted that the 245 average was kind of what you could expect, and I think that's because that the expected batting average for a couple years was around that. To your credit, Steve, you were saying you thought the average could go up. It has. He is hitting 274 on the season with a 289 XBA. That's the Savants, and 14 homers, 14 steals. So yeah, like last year he had the 18 homers, 47 steals. He hasn't been going bonkers on the base paths.
He's been caught 10 times.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're just going to continue to send him, I guess. Like if he's still running this often. I want to kind of game log him. Let's see. Has he been going recently? This is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's gone 10 games where he's only ran once and he got caught. So I don't know.
He had 3 steals the second game of the season too.
Okay.
So
that's a little bit worrying, but overall for Abrams, you obviously have to love what you're seeing with the hit tool, and also the fact that we thought last year was kind of a high water mark with the 18 homers, and it looks like he's definitely going to eclipse that this year. So, in terms of the batted ball data, one thing you got to love is the ground ball rate. 2 years ago was 52%. Last year it was 44.8. And this year is 37.6. So he's traded out all those ground balls with line drives this year, which is probably where all that batting average is coming in. So, yeah,
Abrams did have good. 33 steals in the second half last year in 70 games. So, if you remember, he did, sort of take off and just go crazy with the steals. He had 9 through June. In July, he had 16. In August, he had 13. But he was only caught 4 times last year. I wonder if, I think Abrams did miss a game. I don't think he went on the IL. He did get hurt. I'm trying to I'll look it up as to what it was, but there was an injury, and I'm wondering if that's preventing him from, being the base stealer that we expected. Because, as much as with the jammed left shoulder in early June, so, maybe that's, not wanting to slide in head first, right? So why run if that's the case? I haven't watched that many national games. I wonder if he's sliding feet first. That's why he's getting caught when he is running a little bit. So it's hard for, as much as I do want to take a victory lap on this, without the elite steal numbers, I don't the power's been much better than you expected. And, he already has 14, where he had 18 last year. I know it was sort of a similar story where he did break out power wise, at least post June last year. But without that that elite speed and the 40-ish plus steal pace. I don't know if he's going to return that value. I guess maybe if he even does run at this rate, gets 25 homers, 25-ish steals, and has an 840 OPS. Sure, yeah,
That would get there. Much
that would get
different.
there. That would get there. It would be much different, but it would still get there, I guess. And I guess it goes to show that there was a little bit more tools in the toolbox than just like good enough power and speed for Abrams. There is a bit of a hit tool there, right? Like it's 90th percentile launch angle sweet spot. He does chase a bit, but doesn't strike out that much. And hits the ball hard enough and gets the most out of those barrels. Like it's another one that's full pull side power for Abrams there.
Yeah, it's one that's definitely a surprise for me. And
also, Nationals Park is much better hit in the summer, right? It gets really, really hot there too.
That's right. So shout out there on that was one Alex T had, which I totally agree with. So I think, we'll list off some other names, but we're running a little long. I want to save a couple things at the end here, Steve. But yeah, some other names like Brent Rooker was thrown out. I think that's a good one. Jose Miranda, I know he had the big 5 for 5 day, but just his plate discipline,
12 for 12 he was. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then we talked about Gunner. That was one BGAF threw out, was Gunner's Leap. I think we discussed on the last show that he was probably a top 5, top 6 overall pick next year, the way he's playing. And then I think we got to take a turn to Negative Town, Steve, as we wrap up the show here. And this is where we had like the bad and the ugly. We just talked about the good for a good hour, but the bad and the ugly, I think we've got to focus on, I guess, bad first. And for me, this was one that BGAF threw out there. We don't need to dwell all that much, but just remembering that the rookies that were drafted now, Wyatt Langford and Jackson Holiday, I think Holiday is probably the ugly there, just 2 for 34 and then optioned. But Langford is kind of an interesting one because an 87 ADP, that's a lot of draft capital, only 5 homers and 7 steals, but he's heating up past month, 947 OPS. I saw that ridiculous rob he had out in the outfield, snagging one over the fence. So like, it just seems like, and then somebody in the Discord said that he's still odds on favorite, right? For AL Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
So Langford, maybe you're not that upset if you did get him. Maybe that's not even a bad one. I don't know.
No, he's really picked it up over, June and July. He had 309 in June with 3 homers and 6 stolen bases. Like, yeah, you're going to take that. And like, as bad as it was in April, he was hurt in May, like to still come out of that with a 270 line to date with being a 5% better than league average, and still contributing with 5 and 7 steals. Like, sure, there's a lot to be excited about, but I mean, if you just close your eyes and after spending, a top 75 pick, and looked at his line, you're not doing that again. If you saw 5 homers, 7 steals, 270, I guess that just goes to show you how much the hype was on him heading into draft season. Yeah. But the last 2 months are encouraging, and I mean, Vegas believes in it with the odds being there.
Steamer had,
Steamer has him at like 2. Where the projections have him at, 260, 8 homers, 6 steals the rest of the way. I think I would take the over on all of that. The most aggressive there is Zips with a 120 WRC plus the rest of the way with 8 homers, 7 steals, and a 265 batting average, close to an 800 OPS. I think that's probably fair.
15, 270 is not worth.
I think people were hoping for the Gunnar Henderson year, or the Corbin Carroll year, and despite Langford being really, really good and really, really polished and so young,
Mhm.
um, it just goes to show you that there is still some risk with these guys. So um,
He was this
it's
year's he
it's
was this
trending
year's
up.
Jordan Walker, you know?
Yeah, it's trending up. It's going to be good. Maybe there'll be a discount next year if it's sort of just a doubled pace, but I don't know. It looks like a breakout could be coming. Like
It could
he's
be.
been
It could be.
really, really good recently.
Tyler brought up Pablo Lopez, which I think we would totally agree. I mean,
Yes.
we talk about accountability all the time. That's why we do the chalkboard. We'll be talking about that next week. But while Pablo wasn't on our chalkboard, Steve, you and I were all about him as
Yeah,
like,
like yes, he top 5-ish pitcher. Yeah.
so I've definitely, if it weren't for one of the Goon Squad members of my home league who always wins, having him, I would console the manager who is dealing with Pablo Lopez plus
Hey,
5 ERA.
I've been telling you to trade for him. I would still do that if I were you.
I did throw one out and he left it sitting for like 7 days, and I was like, okay, I hate, like
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
got to start coming up and he's sitting out there
Uh-huh.
on a trade. I was like, I'm going to pull it until I see what happens. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so Pablo Lopez is one. And then I got to throw out Goldie and Arenado. While it hasn't been as disastrous as the first like 6-8 weeks of the season, certainly both of those guys have a long way to go. Goldie, especially with the 230 average. The power has woken up a little bit. Now he's at 13 homers. But yeah, that I was banging the drum big time that Goldie was undervalued,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been the complete opposite. And then yeah, Arenado, it's been the 267. It's just the pop, just 8 homers.
Gone.
Yeah, he's going to be a
Do you think
very
do you think
mundane.
Arenado, if he does get, I know there's been just like Twitter speculation of like Dodgers. I know one of my buddies Sal threw a big Yankees fan threw out maybe the Yankees possibly getting him for third base. Do you think a change of scenery would revive him a little bit, or do you think he's sort of toast as I'm asking you this as a Cardinals fan, and maybe you're
Yeah.
negatively biased against it, but
No, I think
it's just so
I
hard to
think
tell
he'd be
because
revived, Steve. I
you
think he would
you
be
think so,
revived, man.
really,
Because I've just seen it happen enough. And you look
your
at a guy
boy
like
Rich was
Marcell
like
Ozuna.
your boy like Rich was like the Cardinals are the ones that usually do the reviving on these sort of guys with their devil magic. Like if it's not going to happen there, where's it going to happen? And it's just so tough because like he was never a Statcast darling. Was never a barrel rate guy. Even in his prime seasons, right. It wasn't like a
Yeah,
Soto or Judge bright red page. It was all middling, and he just knew how to
you're right.
and
Kind
where
of
to
a
hit the
Chris
ball.
Bryant-y
Yeah,
type of thing.
yeah, yeah. And he was still really good at it, but didn't strike out. Still wasn't striking out. Still wasn't whiffing. But the batted ball numbers and the quality contact are just, even for his standards, just way down there.
Yeah. Yeah, his name came up on a couple interesting things for like right when all the bat speed stuff came out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It was concerning.
where was he though? Because I thought that was one where like Eno and DVR were breaking it down. Okay, maybe it was that I'd have to dig in. I'm not quick enough with the bat speed stuff yet. Yeah, I thought that there was something about like it was the percent of hard swings or something. His looked better than the surface line,
Interesting,
but
interesting. Yeah, yeah. I remember. Thinking about it now. Yeah, I know the narrative is out there. I don't know exactly what it was, but there was something with Arenado as
that
far
was
as
like
like,
a little more than meets the eye, where it was like,
yeah,
oh, that's
exactly,
interesting.
exactly.
That might not be a
Yeah,
bad thing. Like I know it was
yeah,
Eno talking about that,
yeah,
but I'd have to track it down.
yeah,
Anyway, yeah, I mean, we'll see. I just again, he's only 33. I feel like the you're right that the StatCast stuff isn't there, but I don't know. It's such a bad ballpark. They've been so bad. Um, so part of me is just being pessimistic about it and saying once he goes, he's going to go off
yeah.
like
I, I,
Ozuna.
I, I hear you. I hear you.
Um, You want to round out with anything,
Last
Steve?
one. Torque. Because it's someone that I think we were pretty excited about. I know I used him in a keeper league. I thought that he was a good option at first baseman. At first base is like, he was probably being drafted as like their 12th first baseman. I thought it was a good, if you wait on first baseman, Torque was good. He was so good in the second half last year. Still had 30 homers, 94 RBIs and 88 runs on a bad Tigers team, while basically doing nothing for the first half.
Mm-hmm.
Right in the second half, he OPS'd. He had a 121 WRC plus with an OPS of 816. So yeah, I mean maybe that's enough to, and it was a 260 ISO. Sure, the OBP was low and the batting average was low, but that had a lot to do with the 261 BABIP for as hard as he hit the ball in the second half last year. So I don't know. I'm just really surprised that I could have seen Torque. Okay, yeah, he hit 200, but has 18 homers in the first half. Like that's what I thought the downside was, or even like a 15 homer if it went really bad. For him to be as bad as he was this year is just super, super surprising for me, and super sad, honestly.
Yeah, it is. It's a bummer. We did like him as a parachute pick. The 14% barrel rate we thought would only go up for like a 24-year-old.
50% hard hit rate. Yeah.
Yeah. He did launch a 3-run homer tonight.
There you go.
So,
what's his over? He is, man.
Is it for the Toledo Mud Hens?
Yeah. He's hitting 256, 356, 409 for a 764 OPS. That's 100 WRC plus with now I think it's the 5 homers. So hasn't been lighting the world on fire in AAA. Just a 32.5% hard hit rate.
Yeah, that's no question.
It's not screaming.
It's a huge surprise. I think you could have given us a lot of outcomes, and this would not have been one that we really bet on. What's kind of weird is, again, I'm just on rolling charts for him, and like his strike zone judgment improved this season. His decision value, this is in the majors, rolling chart improved. But it was just like the contact, like
the quality contact suffered so much. Yeah,
he's just not making contact, and the pop
not hitting the ball hard. Yeah,
right. Yeah, so
that's the one thing that you would have thought would have been there no matter what.
Yep. So that's Torkelson. Well, this is the full slate, and I think it'll be interesting second half of the season, Steve. Even ones we didn't talk about, like Corbin Carroll. Blake Snell, who of course has had a hard time even being on the field, but has been awful, minus his start yesterday. But yeah, this is it's fun to keep tabs because I feel like you spend so much time looking at the relevant guys or the guys who are on your roster that you kind of miss the narratives a little bit if you don't like come up for air and talk about this stuff. So thought it was a blast.
Yeah, two that and maybe because it didn't, just the way that I phrased the question, it's hard to qualify these guys as surprise just because they are so good and such popular names. But I'm surprised no one's surprised that Aaron Judge has 32 home runs a week before the All-Star break, or that Ellie De La Cruz has 48 steals.
That's more surprising,
right?
Just because we've seen Judge, go for
maybe because they're first and second round players. It was more expected, but it's still crazy that, especially after April Judge had, like, that's what's surprising. It's like Aaron Judge was batting under 200 with 6 home runs or whatever in April, and now is on pace to have a better year than 2022 or whatever it was when he had 62 homers. And that Ellie is the first hitter since like Ricky Henderson, or the first hitter ever to have 15 doubles, 15 homers, and 45 steals before the All-Star break. Yeah.
So funny. Ellie had 17 in April and 14 in May. Only 8 in June, but the fact that he's already got 5 this month in July
Yeah.
in just 10 days. Like he's going for 80, right? Like he's got
Yeah. I know
Oh
he said he wanted 100. I see he's a little bit off the pace of 100, but you never
I
know.
missed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are it's like we're not surprised, but we're impressed on
Yeah,
those ones.
that's fair. Yeah,
Yeah,
not surprised,
and
but impressed. So that doesn't count as misses necessarily. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and a special shout out to the Pitcherless Discord again for all you guys who were throwing names out. That was a great recap. Next week, All-Star break, we will have another show that will come out, but we'll be talking about some chalkboard stuff. We'll get into some more good stuff, and then before long, we'll be looking at kind of the home stretch here, guys. I know it kind of depends on like home league settings and everything, but after All-Star break, it's not quite like for me, Steve, it gets to crunch time quickly.
For
So
head to
I'm
head,
excited.
after the All-Star break for head to head, especially if there's some of the leagues I know it's popular to do like 2-week semifinals, 2-week finals, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And for like 4 deeper leagues with 14 teams and more teams making the playoffs, there's more rounds. So for Roto, there's so many more weeks in the long run. Not that the head-to-head isn't, but I know that's a lot of podcasts don't cater to it, but it's what it's the most popular
It is.
format.
And every year we do the super rudimentary strength of schedule look where we're checking out who gets to play the White Sox in 3 different series.
Yeah.
So we got that coming up in a couple weeks as well. So.
Yeah, that's been a great show for us, I think.
I get a lot out of it just because it's like it's a tiebreaker or whatever it is. So we got a lot of good stuff on the way. Thank you guys as always for joining us, and especially for that the bunch of you guys who are on this stream as we're going right now. You guys can always hit us up on Twitter for any topics, even advice questions you guys got for your teams down the home stretch. We're on Twitter at WinsAbovePod. I'm at Van_verified. Steve is at Stav8818. Or you can email the show, winsAboveFantasy@gmail.com. But if you guys are still with us, please go out, give us a rating and review. It goes a long way for us for the show. But that rounds us out for episode 147, talking biggest surprises of the first half. I think we'll be back next week, but you guys certainly enjoy All-Star break as it comes. And thank you as always for talking baseball with us.
Thanks for listening, guys. Later.